We are following breaking news out of Chatsworth. The LAPD investigating a possible home invasion overnight at a home believed to be owned by King Combs. He is the son of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs.
This wasn't random. People are calling it a message. Christian Combs, yeah, Sean Combs' son. His house was reportedly targeted in an attempted break-in. And listen, this is where things start to get really crazy. Because people aren't treating this like something random. Not at all. The way it's being talked about right now, some are calling it a message, a warning and a statement at the same time. And it's got everyone talking. The conversation online is getting loud, and not in a calm way either. Meanwhile, you've got Usher making headlines for his own situation, and Young Miami still standing firm in hers. And all of this combined, it's making people look at everything differently. Because from what's being said, this wasn't just some careless, random move. The timing, the target, the way it allegedly went down, it has people questioning everything. Some are even suggesting this could have been intentional, not necessarily about getting in, but about sending a signal. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because when you connect this to everything else happening around Sean Combs and his circle right now, it starts to feel like more than just coincidence. The whispers are getting louder, the speculation is getting bolder, and people are starting to look at this from a completely different angle. Not as an isolated moment, but as part of something bigger. Now, none of this is confirmed, but that's exactly why people are paying attention. Because sometimes it's not just about what happened, it's about what it could mean. And if even part of what's being suggested is true, then what this actually represents might be way bigger than people think. And that matters, because situations like this tend to move fast. Information comes out in pieces, details can change, and what people believe at the beginning isn't always the full picture. So this isn't about presenting a final version of the truth. It's about breaking down what's being talked about and why people are reacting the way they are. This is a real-time situation, and right now there's a mix of facts, assumptions, and theories all blending together. That's exactly why it's getting so much attention, because people aren't just reacting to what may have happened, they're reacting to what they think it could mean. And those two things can take the story in very different directions. So this video is here to lay everything out. What's being said, what's being questioned, and why it's turning into a bigger conversation than expected. Now let's get into what's being reported so far. According to multiple reports, this situation allegedly happened early in the morning when police were called out to a property in Porter Ranch, Los Angeles. This is believed to be the home connected to Christian Combs and his girlfriend Raven, which already makes the situation feel more personal. The incident is being described as a possible hot prowl burglary. And what that means, from what's being explained, is that the attempt may have taken place while people were actually inside the home. So this wasn't just an empty property, it's being suggested that someone was there at the time, which adds a completely different level of tension. From what's been shared, the person or people involved allegedly tried to gain access through the rear door of the house. There's no clear indication that they actually made it inside, but the attempt itself appears to have been enough to raise concern. Another detail that's been circulating is that more than one person may have noticed something was wrong. An employee at the property is said to have contacted authorities after realizing someone was trying to get in. At the same time, it's also being reported that someone monitoring the surveillance system may have called it in as well. So this could have been unfolding in real time, with multiple people aware of what was happening. And this part is important. Despite how intense it sounds, there are no reports suggesting that anyone was harmed. The individuals involved reportedly did not gain entry, and the situation did not escalate beyond the attempted break-in. That's what's being reported so far. Now here's where things start to feel a little different, and why people online are looking at this situation more closely. From what's being shared, this isn't just any random property. It's believed to be a relatively new home for Christian Combs and his girlfriend Raven, a place they reportedly moved into not that long ago. And normally, that detail wouldn't raise any questions, but in this case, it did. Because one specific detail started catching attention online. The home is said to be in Raven's name, not his. Now on the surface, that doesn't automatically mean anything unusual. Raven has her own business and brand, so it's completely possible that she purchased the home herself. That's one straightforward explanation. But once that detail started circulating, people online began asking questions. Some believe there could be more behind that setup. The idea being, if certain assets are not directly tied to him, they might be harder to access in case of legal or financial complications. Again, that's not confirmed. It's just a theory that's been gaining traction in discussions. And that's where the conversation starts to shift. Because if true, it would suggest a level of planning happening behind the scenes. Not necessarily anything illegal, but intentional, strategic. Now, whether there's any truth to that or not is still unclear. But when you combine that detail with an attempted break-in at that same property, it creates a situation that people don't just brush off. It makes them pause. And it explains why this incident is being looked at as something potentially more layered than it first appeared. Now, this is where the conversation changes, because for a lot of people, this situation isn't being viewed as just an isolated incident anymore. It starts to connect to something bigger, something already happening in the background. And that's where Sean Combs comes into the picture. Right now, there's already a lot of attention surrounding him, his situation, and everything connected to his name. So naturally, when something like this happens around his family, people don't look at it in a vacuum. They start connecting dots. Some are beginning to question what influence really looks like in a moment like this. Because for years, the perception was clear. Power, reach, connections. The idea that certain figures had a level of control that made situations like this almost unthinkable. That nothing would really touch them. But now that perception seems to be shifting. Not completely gone, but changing. Because the reality is, power doesn't just disappear overnight. Influence doesn't suddenly vanish, and connections don't instantly stop existing. But it can weaken. And that's the part people keep coming back to. There's growing conversation that things behind the scenes may not be operating the same way they once did. That certain levels of access, communication, or control could be more limited than before. Again, none of that is confirmed, but it's what's being discussed. And if even part of that is true, it changes how incidents like this are interpreted. Because what might have once been seen as impossible, suddenly, doesn't feel that way anymore. And that shift in perception alone is enough to change the entire conversation. Now, this is where things move fully into theory, because people online aren't just reacting to what happened. They're trying to explain it. And right now, 3 main theories keep coming up. First, the message theory. This idea suggests the situation may not have been random. Some believe this wasn't just about breaking in, but about sending a signal. Not necessarily to cause harm, but to show that access is possible. A warning, a reminder, something meant to be noticed. There's no confirmation of this, but the way people are talking, that's one of the main interpretations. Second, the power shift theory. This one goes deeper. It's based on the idea that influence might not be what it used to be. For a long time, there was a perception that certain names carried weight, that people wouldn't even attempt something like this out of fear, alone. But now, some are saying that hesitation might be fading, that influence could be weakening, or at least not being perceived the same way. And if that's true, it changes how people move. And third, the exposure risk theory. This focuses on visibility. The idea that in today's world, where everything is shared online, homes, locations, lifestyle, it creates a different level of risk. Some believe that the more visible everything becomes, the less untouchable anyone really is. That attention itself can make situations like this more likely. Now, none of these theories are confirmed, but these are the conversations happening right now, and why this situation feels bigger than it might seem at first glance. And this is the part that has people really uneasy, because if this wasn't random, then the question changes completely. It's no longer just about what happened, it becomes about what it could mean going forward. For a lot of people watching this, the concern isn't just the attempted break-in itself, but what it might represent. Not something proven, but enough to make people pause and look at the situation differently. Because when something like this is connected, even loosely, to Christian Combs and the wider circle around Sean Combs, people don't just move on quickly. They start asking bigger questions, like, if this wasn't random, then what does that mean for the people closest to him? Not in a dramatic way, not jumping to conclusions, but in terms of awareness, attention, caution, because situations like this create a sense of uncertainty. And uncertainty is what makes people uneasy. Now, there's nothing suggesting anything ongoing or targeted beyond this moment. But when there isn't a clear explanation, people naturally start wondering if this was just a one-time situation or something that signals a shift. Not who's next in a literal sense, but more in terms of, does. This opened the door for things that people previously thought wouldn't happen, and that's the feeling that's starting to build. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Because when perception changes, even slightly, it changes how everything around it is viewed. And right now, that's exactly what seems to be happening. At the end of the day, this could still be just a failed burglary, and that's something that shouldn't get lost in all of this. Because when you take a step back from the theories, the speculation, and everything people are saying online, what we're left with, based on what's being reported, is a situation where someone attempted to break into a home, didn't succeed, and no one was harmed. And situations like that do happen. Not everything has a deeper meaning. Not everything is connected to a bigger narrative. Sometimes it really is just a random moment, a bad decision, or someone acting without any larger intention behind it. So it's important to keep that perspective. At the same time, this is where things don't fully settle. Because even if this could be explained simply, the timing is what keeps coming up. Everything surrounding Sean Combs right now, the attention, the discussions, the overall environment, creates a context that makes this feel bigger than it might actually be. And that's where the tension sits. On one side, you have a situation that can be understood as isolated. On the other, you have a moment that fits into a wider conversation people are already paying attention to. And when those two things overlap, it naturally raises questions. Not conclusions, just questions. So yes, this could absolutely be just a random failed attempt. But the timing, that's what keeps people talking. And until there's more clarity, that question isn't going anywhere. But when you zoom out from this situation, a bigger message starts to take shape. Because this isn't just about one incident anymore. It's about how power, image, and influence are evolving. For a long time, there was this idea that certain people operated on a different level, that success, money, and connections created a kind of protection, an image that nothing could really reach them, that problems would be handled quietly, behind the scenes, without ever fully surfacing. That perception was strong, but now it feels like that image is starting to shift. Not disappear completely, but change. Because the reality is, influence doesn't vanish overnight. Connections don't suddenly stop existing. But the way that influence is perceived, and how far it actually reaches, can start to look very different under pressure. And that's what people are noticing right now. At the same time, there's another factor that can't be ignored: visibility. In today's world, everything is more exposed than ever. Homes, locations, lifestyles, so much of it is shared publicly, whether intentionally or not. And while that visibility can build status and attention, it also creates a different kind of risk. Because the more people see, the more people know. And the more attention there is, the harder it becomes to maintain that idea of being untouchable. That's the shift, not just in what's happening, but in how it's being perceived. And for a lot of people watching all of this unfold, it's starting to feel like one thing is changing for real. The era of being untouchable might be over. So what do you think? Was this really just a random attempted break-in, or does it feel like something more calculated? Because the more you look at it, the harder it becomes to land on just one answer. On one side, it could be exactly what it looks like: a failed attempt, nothing more, nothing deeper. But on the other side, when you factor in the timing, the people involved, and everything else happening in the background, it starts to feel like there could be more to the story. And that's why this conversation isn't going away anytime soon. People are watching closely now. Not just this situation, but what happens next, how it's handled, what details come out, and whether this turns into something bigger or fades out as just another moment that got extra attention. Because sometimes the real story isn't just what happens, it's what happens after. So I want to hear your perspective. Do you think this is being overanalyzed? Or do you feel like there are pieces we're not seeing yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's actually break this down together. And if you're into content like this, where we don't just repeat headlines, but really look at what might be happening underneath the surface, make sure you hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay connected. Because situations like this tend to evolve fast. And if anything new comes out, you already know we're going to be right here talking about it.